I want you guys to hear this. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I previously filmed enough footage to have about 15 minutes worth of a video for this, but I don't have a laptop. I'm working off of my iPad. So I lost all that footage after an application crashed on me. I had to delete the application, re-download it, and then realized after re-downloading it that all my footage was gone. So you guys get to watch me take everything apart, put it back together, and hopefully you learn from my mistake as well. We're going to be putting together the Serialnine dual caliper kit. What that consists of is 4-pot Willwood brakes, the billet aluminum adapters from Serialnine, and then Stop Tech steel braided lines. We're also going to be going over my location for my GK Tech hidden reservoir and how I plan on routing my brake lines, more or less at least, because I don't have all the hardware, so we'll work with what we've got. Alright, before we get started with reassembly, I'm just going to go over what comes in the packaging. You have your Serialnine aluminum billet adapters. You have your 4-pot Willwood brakes. You have your Stop Tech steel braided line. And then you have all the hardware necessary. Alright, so this is how everything looks disassembled. When you start off, you obviously have your rotor, you have your caliper on this side, and then you have a massive dust shield covering up the entire hub. What Serialnine recommends is you either cut the dust shield here, and then again on, I believe it's here, leaving the bottom, or what I did was I did away with it entirely. I used an angle grinder. It took a solid like 15 minutes of actually working on it, and I just think it's a lot easier to work with when you don't have the massive shield around it. In order to get the rotor off, you need to take your caliper, which is 2/17s on the back sides. Once you take it off, you can see how I zip tied it to the coil. Just get it out of the way. Make sure there's no pressure on that brake line. Once you take off the 2/17s, you can remove the caliper, and then you can remove your rotor as well, exposing everything that's needed. Pretty straight. So the install is pretty straightforward. You have two of the adapters. One has 3 holes and the other one has 2. The one with the 3 holes is going to be placed on the backside of the car. The one with the 2 holes is going to be placed on the front side. So that gives you a bit of an idea of how it's going to end up being. What I found to be helpful was I actually bolted the brake caliper onto my adapters first to make sure everything was going to be lined up the way it was supposed to be, and then I took the caliper off, exposing just the adapters, put the rotor back on, and then I was able to put the caliper back on. So we're going to go ahead and do that again so there's no complications. For the caliper, you have these bolts here, kind of like a flanged nut. They are 2/14, so a 14 for the nut and a 14 for the bolt as well. We're not going to put a thread locker just yet. We want to make sure that everything lines up. So you can see this is how it's supposed to look once the adapters are on. Obviously it's going to go on the back side now, but this is how it's supposed to look. You have the 214 bolts, 214 nuts, and then I leave it loose so I have room to play to manipulate where the bracket's gonna go. At this point I get the 17 millimeter, which is for the primary brake. I push that through, and then I run over and I grab my 2 other bolts. So it's a same thing, a flange bolt with a 17 millimeter nut. And now you can see, you see how it doesn't go in. That's precisely why I put everything in place first, because I don't want to put the rotor and then assume that this is going to go on top of that. Smooth sailing. So there we go. Everything looks good. We're going to go ahead and tighten it just a little bit, just snug enough to where it's not going to be moved. We're going to throw our rotor back on. And what I like to do is put a lug nut or 2 on the rotor to have some type of pressure on it so it's not wobbling around. And yes, I do realize that the lug nuts, the AutoZone lug nuts that I have are pretty crap, but living in Miami, I just recently got a garage. Living in Miami, I didn't want my car to end up on brakes. Not that I think they can even get a jack under my car, but don't want to run the risk. So make sure that the caliper is compressed so you have enough room to actually slide it onto the rotor. And go ahead and start assembling. So what we want to do at this point is, I don't know if you guys can see in here, let me see if I can turn on the light. You can see how it's starting to be exposed, the bolt, once we push it through. What I do is I slide the nut in far enough to catch the thread, and then I start threading it on while pushing the bolt back in. Alright, we have everything bolted up, nice and snug. I realized after I did all this that I didn't put the thread locker like I said I was going to, so it is what it is. Here we have, I'm pretty sure I put these backwards, but it's going to do its job nonetheless. These are the 17 millimeter nuts, the 17 millimeter bolt for the primary caliper. Then you have the 214 on top, 14 millimeter bolts, and then 14 on the back side as well. Then you can see here the bleeder valve is going to be towards the rear of the car, and then the opening for your stop tech brake line is going to be towards the front. We're going to route it now and we'll see how it comes out. I already have everything mocked up, so it's actually extremely simple. We don't want everything too tight, or anything too tight rather. So we're going to put it as loose as possible. And right here, see if I can show you. Right here is I believe it's a 12 millimeter bolt that is for the factory parking brake. I have done away with that. I know I'm going to regret it later on, but we'll deal with it when it comes. So you can see we routed it extremely loose to this bracket that ties into the factory brake line setting, or not brake line, we tied into the factory parking brake setting. And we're going to go from here through the trans tunnel and then all the way up there where it should be going into the, you can see that little bracket, that's for the GK Tech reservoir, to that little, I guess, T brace, I don't know what to call it. You can see here how much room there is in this trans tunnel once everything's actually gone. So I have both I have both brake lines ran. The only concern that I have is I'm really debating on doing one and then teeing it off back here rather than two up front and then one through the factory emergency brake hole. I think it would be a lot simpler if I did one, less brake fluid, less routing, but we'll see when we get there. Alright, as seen in the previous video, you can see that this thing is still a complete disaster. The reason I pulled off the dash is because I removed the heater core. It wasn't very easy to get to with the dash still on. So next few days I should be able to throw this thing back on. We'll see. I want to go through some of these wires and see what's needed, what's not needed. I'm not running an ABS, so some of these wires aren't needed, and we'll see. As you can see, I've tagged everything too to try to make my life a little bit easier. Anyways, the master and the reservoir that I was going with is the GK Tech hidden reservoir. It keeps things pretty hidden. It was originally designed for an S13 or an S14, so the bracket has the curvatures needed to fit on a trans tunnel for an S13. You can see how it kind of slopes off here, and obviously in an S13 it's a little different. It may slope off, let's say like back here, so it's kind of a fit to form situation that they cut. Anyways, I'm applying it to this car because I think the application will work nonetheless. So what it has a it's kind of like a sandwich system. On the bottom of the trans tunnel there's a plate, so when you run these through bolts, it's 4 through bolts, it kind of squeezes that plate and squeezes onto the trans tunnel, making everything as stout as possible. So what I did was I centered it as much as possible because I still want to retain my center console. I'm going to cut everything needed to hopefully have my cushion. I've seen people run their reservoirs here and then do away with the top cushion, and to me I want to make it look as OEM as possible, so we're going to cut away the top cushion and hopefully have everything fit the way it was intended to fit. So I centered it as much as possible. I drilled 4 holes into the tunnel and essentially through bolted everything that was needed. And you can see it's pretty stout. The only thing is I obviously have to tighten that. And then from there, this is meant to be tied into a factory emergency brake. Obviously I don't have an emergency brake, handbrake at least, in this car, so we're going to be running a line from here to more or less around here. I'm hoping to do a pull up like OEM style handbrake, let's say like an GS300 style handbrake. A lot of GS's, they do the SC300 handbrake and they bolt it to the inside of the trans tunnel. I wanted to sit with the center console and all the garnish and everything. I want it to look like it was meant to be that way from Lexus or Toyota. A lot of people have been telling me to do the pullback style, and I'd rather put in the extra work and do the pull up. So once we get all that stuff sorted, I'm needing a bunch of hardware and fittings and whatnot to finish this install. But once we run it from the master, it's going to go through this little hole here. This hole was meant for the factory parking brake. I need to order some grommets to prolong the life of the brakes, but it should come out pretty nice. And I don't know if I'm going to run a hard line or steel braided line yet. I'll more than likely order a steel braided line and run it that way so I can have some room to flex everything. The yaw sensor goes on here, and then there's another sensor that drills into this spot here too. No idea what I'm gonna do with that yet. I'll probably just relocate it, hopefully, let's say to the back or the front, whatever. We'll figure it out when we get there. So before we end this video, I wanted to show you guys what I ordered, what I plan on putting together, and what the next video will consist of. I ordered a bunch of R154 parts from Drift Motion. Shout out Drift Motion, shout out Aaron from Drift Motion. His whole entire team is working through this pandemic, making sure parts are getting out to me, out to us. These parts aren't necessary. These parts aren't essential. I'm not using this vehicle to get to work, to make money, to pay my bills. I'm doing this out of pure passion. I'm doing this out of essentially curiosity. If I'm able to do it myself, if I'm able to build a car by myself and with the help of a couple other friends. Drift Motion got these parts out to me in about a week or so. The reason I go to Drift Motion is because they are extremely supportive of JZ swaps and manual swaps, anything OEM really for Toyota or Lexus. I don't know any other motors. I'm sure he does a lot of other motors for Nissan and all the other companies that don't really matter. The ones that matter are Toyota and Lexus, let's be honest. But anyways, I ordered a bunch of parts. They came in the mail. I'll show you what I got. We're gonna put it together starting tomorrow. I'm gonna start filming tomorrow. That video will drop next week. So let's start. We have a pilot bearing. All right, we have, check it out, OEM from Toyota or Lexus from Drift Motion. It is our throw-out bearing. We have as well OEM clutch fork for an R154. I have a later model. No, wait. I have an early model. I have the tripod shifter R154. I don't have the gooseneck. I've been told the gooseneck feels like shifting a truck, which I could definitely see that. So I wanted to steer clear of that. If I was gonna do that route, then I might as well go CDO9. And I really don't wanna go CDO9. The reason I went R154, as silly as it sounds, I wanted to do everything Toyota to this car. I wanted to keep the motor Toyota. I wanted to keep the transmission Toyota. A purist in that sense. I didn't want to stray and put Nissan parts in this car. As silly as that sounds, I know I can find a CDO9 significantly cheaper, and I know I'm gonna rag on this transmission, and I know I'm gonna have to rebuild it. But you have to pay to play, am I right? So let's go ahead and keep going. We have my favorite part. I've been waiting for this for a week. We have the tripod shifter, the tripod housing rather, and the tripod shifter to go onto this transmission. We have an OEM clutch, remanufactured clutch cover. So it is a beautiful looking pressure plate for the R154 that we've got. We have our, I believe it's 18 pounds, flywheel from Drift Motion themselves. We have the ARP head studs. I keep saying head studs. We have ARP studs to mate with this. And I believe that's it. The only thing I'm missing are clutch lines and the clutch pedal itself. Once we get all that stuff, we'll move forward with that. And once we get that stuff, we can get motor mounts and everything put together, throw it in the car, and hope, I'm really hoping, sub 6 months we'll have this car going. We will have fun. I have a plan to go up north with my buddies with Club Wonder to do some partying, if you will. I don't want to incriminate myself, but we might take a trip over to Mexico and have some fun. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, thanks for liking, thanks for even taking 5 minutes of your day to watch my video. I'm really hoping that I can continue to do this for years on end. Installing it on our 1999. Fuck. 100. Fuck, bro. Every time. I promise you, This is the 7th take on an intro. I don't know how people do this. Bear with me.